Hey, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm very honored to speak for this group connected to the Japanese American National Museum. As Kellyanne just mentioned, the Irei project has had a wonderful collaboration with the museum. And so I'm going to say a few words today about uh, the kind of whys and hows of the coming together of this book of names uh, and why we are about to embark on a national tour. What I'm trying, just as a kind of general preamble, before I start to speak about the Book of Names itself, I wanted to make a quick note that the Book of Names, the Ireichō, is one third or one part of a three-part monument project to all persons of Japanese ancestry incarcerated during the World War II period. And that in addition to the physical Book of Names, uh, our project also has an online presence as an archive where uh, one can look at a particular name, figure out or find out which camps that individual was incarcerated in, um, uh, and if available, take a look at photographs of the person, so you can learn more about the person behind the name. And that's a project that we're calling a sonic monument, in that it's also has a invitation to and a program that allows people to record names and submit them, and later hear your own recording or other people's recording of all people who are inside of the project. And finally, we have Irei, these sculptural installations that we are building at former confinement sites around the country. And so that's a general project. And obviously today, the focus is going to be on the Book of Names, the Ireichō, and I think most of you are at least tangentially, aware of the book. Maybe some of you have already stamped in it. So maybe some of you have in fact been volunteers connected to the showing of the book to different families. But I wanted to go into a little bit more today about some of the background philosophy and some anecdotes about kind of behind the scenes, how this Book of Names came together and how we think it continues to have meaning. And so I'm going to structure my remarks today with these five questions. Why names? Why a book of names? Uh, why is it difficult to compile the names? In other words, why hasn't it, been done before that a comprehensive list of names has been put together? And why does stamping the names matter? And why a national tour? So around those five questions, I'm hoping to give you an insight into this book of names in a way that might be a little bit uh, not, we haven't advertised all aspects of how this project came together publicly. And so hopefully this will be, even if you're quite familiar with the Book of Names, there'll be something in what I say that will be new or shed light on aspects of the book that you haven't heard about before. So let me start with that first question. Why names? I think as we approach Day of Remembrance in a few weeks, I think we all, have a sense of that question that comes from the fact that, especially after the issuance of the executive order, the idea that all persons of Japanese ancestry were subject to that executive order, to the forced removal and unjust incarceration, and in some cases, family separation, that 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 uh, injustice in American history came from, in part, the conflation of an entire community. Uh, the government didn't really care if you were a little baby or an infirm grandmother. They didn't care if you were a Japanese national or an American citizen. They just lumped everyone together as if the community as a whole represented a threat to national security. And so without due process, so we know that that kind of the injustice part of it, but that idea of conflating a whole group together in a way that, let's say, didn't happen to the entire German American community or entire Italian American community. There's a kind of selective, individualized internment of German nationals and Italian nationals. But with the Japanese American community, there was this kind of conflation of everyone as a group. There's no way a small baby is going to be engaged in espionage or sabotage, but still, it's just deemed as a threat to national security. And so, I think part of the idea of the Names Project was to say, if the government at that time conflated people and didn't respect individuality, our project has to be one where the personhood and the individuality, the dignity of the person is recognized. And so that's, I think, one aspect of why names. And of course, this goes back, I think, for those of us who study Japanese American history, it's something that, in terms of the even early pre-World War II history, if you think about first Japanese who crossed the Pacific, went to Hawaii, worked on the sugar plantations, they're often, the Lunas or the plantation overseers couldn't pronounce, Yamagata, Yamanishi, like it's two, so they just gave them numbers. And so what you see on the right there are little silver, or like little medallions with numbers on them. They call them bango, which in Japanese just means numbers. And that's how people were kind of like treated on the sugar plantations, as if they don't have names. And I think, so therefore, I think that something about this long history of where Japanese, Chinese exclusion, like there's a longer history of racial exclusion that dehumanizes Asian immigrants and people of Asian ancestry that, of course, is linked to, cotton planting, like an earlier history of how Black Americans were treated. And so, in some sense, part of our project is to deal with this, what sometimes I'll talk about maybe a little bit later. We've been terming the racial karma of America. And so in terms of what specifically we were inspired by as to how to frame the Names Project, and why it's called the Irei Project, I think some of you, obviously, just by seeing this image, can tell that the monument that still remains in the cemetery area at Manzanar, the Ireichō, the word I means to console, Re means spirits, and then To is like a tower. That monuments around honoring individuals and personhood and dignity of the person were actually made by Japanese Americans who were incarcerated during their own period of incarceration. And so this monument at Manzanar, which still stands today, had its parallels elsewhere. The Irei in Rower, and the Ireichō at Amachi in Colorado. And here you can see when they dedicated it, they actually include the names of those who passed away in the camp at Amachi, and also those who either volunteered or drafted into the U.S. military and passed away and killed in line of duty or in action, either on the in the European theater as part of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, or with the MIS in the Pacific Theater. But their names are listed, and it's, I think, all of these, the different Ireichō and Irei built during World War II, built by clergy. So the one in Omachi was spearheaded by the Baptist pastor Masahiko Wada, the one at Rower by the Buddhist priest Reverend Daitetsu Hayashima, and Reverend Nagatomi, who you see here, Shinjo Nagatomi. He's the one who wrote the three characters Ireichō into the concrete for the Manzanar monument. And my connection to this history is that his son, Reverend Nagatomi's son, Masatoshi Nagatomi, was my teacher for graduate school in Buddhist studies. And when my teacher passed away suddenly, I was trying to help the family sort out my mentor's books and so forth. And I came across these yellow pages, which are not my teacher's writing in Japanese, but the writings of his father, Reverend Shinjo Nagatomi, his diary during his time in Manzanar, and the sermons that he gave at the Manzanar Buddhist Church every Sunday. And so I started to translate those sermons and the diary, and in it, he talks about the making of the Ireichō, how he wanted it built by August of 1943, because in time for Obon, or which is a Buddhist ceremony to honor the ancestors and the spirits of those ancestors who return for a period of time, and then you do things like ceremonies and dances like Odori and other things to welcome them, and then you have ceremonies to release them as they go back to the other world. But he felt, he writes in his diary, just because he had to do so many funerals and memorial services that first year, that in time for Nibon, the first Obon after people pass away, he wanted to specially honor those who died in camp during that first year and a bit that Manzanar was open. And so he was determined that the monument be built by August 15th, Obon of 1943. And so this is a photo of him on that dedication day, where thousands of people came to pay respect to the ancestors or the spirits of those who had departed. And what he writes in his diary is that the notion of consoling the spirits is, of course, for those who passed away in these very unfortunate circumstances of an American camp. But it's also meant to console the spirits of those who, the family members that remain or left to deal with the loss and the sadness. And so that's what monument building, it seemed to me, as understood by those building monuments in World War II, contain this idea that they're meant to recognize those who've gone before us and ancestors and history, but they're also meant to be something that is consoling or healing for those who are impacted and in a later time feel the sense of loss, and in this case, framed by the injustice. And so that's been at the heart of the Irei project, is to try to maintain the spirit of an example of the people who made monuments to honor names and individuals and persons and dignity when the government wouldn't. And so that's one kind of point I wanted to make today about where this project, the kind of philosophy, or the where do we get our inspiration for how to do this work. The idea, the next question that I had on the list of 5 questions. Okay, now we've answered why names, but why names in a book? And from the tradition, I'm associated. I know most about Reverend Nagatomi, and so is I had thought about this thing called the kakocho. You know, in a lot of temples in historic Japanese American temples, there is a book. Kako just in Japanese just means the past, and cho means registry or book. And it lists all the temple members who passed away since the founding of the temple. And it's a very important book that is often used in memorial services. In other words, for moments when we need to remember and recall the past, we turn to the book of the past and we chant different sutras and so forth, and then we say the names of those who are in this book. And so that's one kind of like cultural reference that's related to Reverend Nagatomi that I wanted to draw on. But the creative director of the project, Sunyoung also had this idea like, what if by placing the names inside something, I mean, it's not a small object in the sense that it's a very large book and it's over 1,000 pages and it's very heavy and it's a monumental thing in one sense, but unlike a traditional sense of a monument, which often I think gets treated in terms of its significance of value by, how big is it? The bigger the better. Like further away you can stand away from it and still see it. That's what makes it monumental, or that's what makes it spectacular, impressive, and worthy. And what the creative director's idea was what if we invert that sense of the more permanent it is, the bigger it is, the scale of it is what gives it value. He said, what if we think about this monument as a book monument, where the names are something where by inviting the idea of stamping names in the book, it becomes an intimate act, a close and personal act of touching the monument and thereby changing it. It becomes impermanent and invites that type of interactivity that actually gains value. The more it changes, the more people interact with it, the more people become personally connected and intimate with the book of names, is actually how the book gets value. So that's the concept we have been working on around a different way of seeing what can serve as a monument. And as I think many of you know, and maybe some of you on this call were some of the people who were involved in this, I had uh, asked different friends, camp survivors, descendants, to go to 75 different sites run by the Department of Justice, the U.S. Army, the WCCA, and the WRA, and collect a little bit of soil from each place. And what our ceramicist, John Hasegawa, managed to do was create these very thin ceramic pieces where he infused a little bit of soil from every one of those incarceration sites. And then we found a way to work with our binder to embed that into the front and back of the book. And so the book is in essence that idea of uh, uh, a project where the community in coming to the monument by having some soil from every camp is in the presence of not only all of the names, but all of these different camps. And we displayed, obviously, in the JANM exhibition, all of the different soils in its particularity. And so you can see like, oh, this is a little red. This is, this kind of actual book almost holding all of the names together in the front and then the different colored soil ceramic piece that John Hasegawa embedded in the back. We have this sense of a national project where all of the camps are being also present or visited, and we drew on this tradition from the Shikoku pilgrimage. I think some of you may know in Japan, one of the most famous is kind of like on the order of, the Hajj or the Santiago de Compostela or the Shikoku Hajuju Hakkasho, the 88 pilgrimage uh, uh, tradition in Japan is probably one of the world's most famous pilgrimages. But uh, there's 88 temples you're supposed to visit, but if you can't visit all of them, there's one place where they've taken the soil from every single temple, and you can visit this one site, and it's as if you've circuited and or traveled to all of the different sites. And so that became our concept for how to design and build the book, would be to have all of the names in there, but it be also be in the presence of the soil and the very grounds of incarceration, as one approached the different names in the book. So now on to the third question. Why is it difficult? I put is because on the one hand, I should say why was it like difficult? Because we did do a printing, but one of the ideas of our project about the impermanence and about the dynamically changing aspect of the monument is that we kept uh, our project open to the idea that it might also change and transform over time if there is any error on our part or the government records part with the spelling of a name or something like that, that we are going to be open to amending it. And in fact, there's no way to compile this list without the help of the community. So we have been doing a lot of research with the help of many different people. I think I saw just on the very quickly on the people attending, people like Russ Endo and Julie Abo and so many others who have helped in the archives and in to try to get two things right. Number one, making sure nobody is left out, that everyone who experienced the incarceration is a part of the project of remembrance, but also we we can't honor them in their individual personhood and give them the proper dignity if we spell their names wrong. And so the premise was we will issue the first edition of the Book of Names, and at that time we had 125,284 names that we were 99% confident were accurate and complete. But being 1% wrong with a number like that is actually still quite a lot wrong. And so we have been correcting over time. We can never get to 100%, but trying to get to close to 99.9% accurate and complete, that's been our goal. But the reason it's difficult to compile a name is because the government never kept a comprehensive list of names of every single person who's incarcerated in all of the different camps. I think typically we tend to look at things like the War Relocation Authority, WRA's Form 26, that's an entry form that people filled out when they first entered into a WRA camp, or at least purportedly from the WRA's point of view, they created these rosters that are called the FAR, or the Final Accountability Rosters, that purportedly accounted for every single person in Poston, in Heart Mountain, in Manzanar, in all of the 10 WRA camps. And what we found out fairly quickly is that's not true. We've added individuals into our project who were in a WRA camp, often babies born. We have a number of them who were born in camp who are not in the FAR that we've added, but also that there are many people who were in, let's say, an assembly center, in a WCCA assembly center, and never went into a WRA camp because they went out for sugar beet farming, or they were a college student that managed to get re-enrolled out east, or for some other reason, a mixed marriage family that was released or whatever, they never entered the WRA camp, never filled out a Form 26, and therefore never appear also on one of these rosters. And then a whole other group of people, the community leaders that were picked up right away under the Kakuto detention program, starting on December 7th, 1941. And the weeks that followed, those people, unless they were paroled and rejoined their families in a WRA camp, also wouldn't appear here. So in terms of the why it's difficult to compile, is we had to look at government rosters, internee cards, which are terribly incomplete, and then looking also at things like sometimes written in Japanese, Jinmeibo, Jinmeiroku, these kind of lists that the internees themselves created in the Department of Justice or Army camps. And sometimes they were printed and mimeographed. Sometimes they were simply handwritten like this. And what they are snapshots in time rosters because they don't purport to list and account for every single person that went into one of these Department of Justice or Army camps. They're just whoever wrote it, compiled it in that month, in that year, is capturing who was there at that time. And so our project has had to layer many, many hundreds and hundreds of these type of lists and try to get comprehensiveness that way. And then on the issue of names being misspelled, you can see this is one of those internee cards of somebody who was in both a WRA Camp Twin Lake, but also in a number of the DOJ and Army facilities like Fort Missoula and Fort Lincoln. And you can see how on this person's card, there's a notation that is on the reverse side of the card, that the subject's apprehension was a mistake due to translation of Japanese characters, meaning they they got the wrong person picked up, and because they got the name wrong, the spelling wrong, and there's lots of different kinds of documents where these type of name corrections within government correspondence is being made. So you can see like, they spelled it Karina when it should have been Katena, or Tarada instead of Terada, or Tomioke instead of Tomioka, things like that. And so we've had to, as a project, look through thousands and thousands of these type of documents also to make sure that we are spelling things correctly. And even then, we think, about like only 99% right, that there are names that we need the community to help us get, Uncle so-and-so's middle name should be X instead of Y. So that's been our intent, is to make sure nobody's left out and everybody's name's spelled right, but it's not as easy as one would think. That I've already kind of answered why does stamping matter. This next question. It matters because of that aspect I just mentioned of we need the community's involvement to help make sure we set the historical record, correct. But also we felt as a project that invitation to have the next name in the book, it's sequenced by date of birth. So it's the oldest person first, baby born right before last of the camps close is the last name. So we sequenced it like that. But to go from the beginning of the book, make sure nobody's, left out. Everybody gets at least one acknowledgement. There are people who died in camp, people who never got married, don't have any descendants to take, note of them. And so we decided we're just going to ask the public to come and put one stamp on the next name that doesn't yet have an acknowledgement and go from the beginning of the book to the end. And if you happen to be Japanese American and connected to this history and you want to honor a sibling or a parent or grandparent or uncle, that we would turn the pages to to do that. The partnership with JANM meant when we started in September 2022 with a big opening ceremony, and then we kind of installed the Book of Names, and it was at the museum up until last month. The campaign has always been, let's make sure every single name, there's 125,284 of them in the book, has at least one stamp. And I'm, glad to report that with the partnership at JANM, 81,485 names, which is a good number out of the total, have been stamped. And just to make a quick note, in terms of the people who, because of our error or the government, were not in the book, we've been creating these addendum sheets where we attach to the Ireichō these extra sheets that account for people who, are part of that 1% that wasn't accounted for. And so this is just a quick example of how we've been adding people. This is somebody that we added on one of the addendum sheets, Kimiko Fuji, who is in the Portland Assembly Center, and then another camp called MISA, both in Oregon. But because she never went to WWII camp, there's no Form 26, there's no final accountability roster that has her name in it. She also was never arrested by the FBI, and so there's no DOJ internee card for her. So how do we make sure people like that are still included? Because and so that's why we really needed the public to help us. And so in this case, her descendants, relatives, sent us documentation. Here's a letter from the Livestock Pavilion, North Portland, and that was what officially it was called, the North Portland Assembly Center. And so here's a letter from her. There's some other documentation of her in that period, and there's a photograph of her at NISA. And so we were able to ascertain she was at Portland Assembly Center, she was in NISA. Let's add her name with that information to the project. Let's print it out on the addendum sheets. And so that's what has been also extremely important for our project. It's the names that are in the book, but also names that we've added subsequent to the first printing. So finally, last question. I think I have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to try to get this answered quickly. But now that we've come up to 81,000 plus, names, but we still have to get to 284 to just deal with the people in the book and a few more names in the addendum sheets. We've conceived of essentially a year and a half where the Ireichō travels around the nation. It's starting next month in Washington, D.C., in concert with the Day of Remembrance. And so obviously that's generally February 19th, and the dates there a little bit before and after typically are the days that people think about doing something to remember this history. And so on the 18th of February next month, we're going to kick off the national tour. We're going to take the Ireichō from LA out to Washington, D.C. And at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., where the archivists are going to take out of the collection the original signed copy of the Executive Order 9066, signed by President Roosevelt, is coming out of storage and will be on display alongside the Ireichō at the National Archives. And there's going to be a program, an event there to kick off the national tour and have a day of remembrance in Washington, D.C. Then the next day, on the 19th, on the 20th, and on the 21st, goes over to the Smithsonian, to the National Museum of American History, where opportunities for people who live in the Washington, D.C. area to come and do stamping there takes place. And the idea for the national tour is in part for, I just heard yesterday, I think somebody who's, I think about 100 years old, 99 or 100, who lives in the DC area, who would like to come and do, make a stamp in the book. Too elderly to travel all the way to LA in the last couple of years whilst he was on display at JANM. And so part of the idea, it's not all of it, but part of the idea of traveling the book is to give opportunities to people like her, camp survivors who may be too frail to travel to LA and the museum, and to bring the book to them. And so that's why we're doing the national tour. We're kicking it off in DC because of the symbolic day of the Day of Remembrance and on the anniversary of the issuance of the executive order, and putting the Book of Names in proximity and in almost like as a kind of response to that executive order is kind of also the point of kicking it off there. And then going to all 10 WRA camps is also, and we also have already scheduled one representative Army DOJ camp, as well as one representative WCCA Assembly Center. But all 10 WRA camps is to go to the very sites of incarceration, to those former confinement sites, place the book onto those the very grounds of incarceration, and then also to meet the executive order, and this be our response, our monument to this history, and it's something that can't be done without the engagement of the broadest American public, and our plans are to, and this is I'll just say a quick word about it. There's a joint Irei project, JANM fundraising campaign to add several more cities and areas of the country so that we can truly make this a national tour, to take the Ireichō to all parts of this nation, to different corners of the country, to make it a truly national project. So that we can finish this project of every single name, 125, being marked and honored, but and also to give people the opportunity, of people who can't travel to LA. But also there's something I think symbolic about traveling to every corner of the nation to tell the story. And so that fundraising campaign, and maybe somebody from JANM can say something about it more at the end, is going on to February 19th. And I think the concept, basic concept for the campaign is we're trying to raise $125,284 dollars as a symbolic number, with the notion that just like with the stamping, we have a box for $1. Like if every single person, just $1 to make the, bar for entry to participate in this fundraising campaign, low. If you can think of one person and that's $1 of contribution to it, and that's going to allow us to really make this a truly national tour. That was the kind of notion that we might be able to, just like the stamping of the book itself, is really a reflection that the community of those who get involved is the monument. It's not that the book is the monument, it's the people who are engaging with it that's the monument. And so that this fundraising campaign is based on that kind of idea as well, that it's best if as many people, even if it's a small amount, could participate with a small contribution that'll allow this to really go around the country, so we can tell this story and provide a way to dignify and honor each person in it. We were having trouble getting to the total, with up until February 19th. And I just wanted to say a special thanks to Joanne Ursig, I think, who's on this call. I know you don't mean to, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but she gave a very, very generous donation that allowed us to get to the point where we are today, that allows us to see that we can get to the final goal. And you know, she did it to honor certain people in her family who are in the Book of Names as well as others. And so I just wanted to end with that thought that this is a project that kind of requires everybody's participation to be meaningful. Um, there's something about all of those stamps making something beautiful that everybody's thoughts and remembrances about Uncle so and so, that's all going into every stamp. And I'm going to end with this anecdote of somebody who uh, he came up to me saying he was really wanted to apologize because he did something he wasn't supposed to with the book, which was that he himself was a camp survivor, but he saw his late wife's name. She passed away last year, and or I guess at this point 2 years ago, and he said that he saw her name and just wanted to stamp it, but then couldn't help himself. He had to like kiss her name, and he was told, you know, you're not supposed to touch the names, and certainly not put lick, you know, get it wet or anything. So, but and so he was apologizing, and I was like, you know what? That kiss, and I know other people have cried on those tears, like people's feelings when they put that stamp on, all of that becomes part of the history of this broader campaign to have our time, our community's efforts to remember this history really just be infused into this book. And so I just need to thank all of you who participated by stamping, and or I know there's some of you who were volunteers who, you know, docents and volunteers at the museum who helped families with this. And so it took everybody's effort to get it up to here, and we're almost there, both in terms of the fundraising thing for the national tour, but also perhaps more importantly for the project to make sure that no one's left out, everybody's name's spelled right, and everybody is honored. And so with that, let me stop and open it up for any questions.
Thank you so much, Duncan. I will just remind me of like how deeply moving this exhibition has been at the museum. And I could speak from, you know, it was a great opportunity for my family as well as so many other families to use this opportunity of stamping the Ireichō as a chance to gather the extended family together and have this moment of healing where you share memories and stories that were passed down through the generation, just taking pause in our life to sit with this experience, this deep history and its lasting impact. And its relevance, I think, its continued relevance today, and why we must remain vigilant in sharing this story to make sure that what happened to the Japanese Americans in during World War II never happens to others again. We've had a question, a couple of questions in the chat. So one is how much has been raised already? I think I think we believe we put the national campaign link, the One Cause link there in the chat. We've raised about 97,000 to date towards our $125,284 goal. As Duncan said, $1 for each of the names are in the book. And so that brings us about to 80% to goal so far. Again, thank you to all those who supported us. Another question is, you know, we put into the chat a link to the website where it lists all of the national tour dates and locations. Duncan, can you talk about, like, are you considering other cities as well? One specifically in the chat was San Francisco, but I'm sure there are other cities and folks who'd be interested to hear, are there plans to extend this, the tour to other cities?
So yes, I think we've had uh, inquiries and proposals from the San Francisco Bay Area, from Seattle, from Honolulu, from Chicago, Albuquerque. Like there have been a number of proposals that have been sent, and based on the success of the fundraising campaign, we want to see uh, if we can accommodate just as many of the cities that actually have a proper venue and a large enough Japanese American community, to warrant adding a city to a tour. So uh, I'm personally confident that we're going to be able to go to lots of different parts of the country. So San Francisco's, and we've definitely received a proposal to do something both on the kind of like San Francisco southeast side of things, and then also something on the East Bay side of the San Francisco Bay Area. So I think we can once the campaign's over. So around the February 20th, we'll announce which 2021, right around there, we'll announce the cities and hopefully dates as well for where they will go.
Great. So folks will continue to, and we will update that on the JANM website as well, and then also include announcements in our regular newsletters and member newsletters too. Duncan, can you talk about the process of making reservations for the stamping, and then how many people will be able to stamp it at a time? Where do they go to register to get stamped for their stamping for each of these locations?
When we make the final announcement about all of the cities and we are set with the national tour as a whole, we will have links for people to register. And each link will be, for that particular. So if you want to do something at Minidoka, there's a Minidoka specific a link where you go online to register to get an appointment. If you want to do it, we add, let's say, San Francisco, you'll get a link specific for that stop, and it'll ask you similar type of questions about and contact information so that we can send you the appointment time and so forth. If you have a preference as to the time or the day, if it's a multi-day thing. So it'll ask those type of questions. It'll also ask if you want to stamp a number of different names. That's not just the next name in the book. It'll ask you, please provide, if possible, not just the name, but if known, the birth year. And what we do is our team researches that ahead of time, creates these locator cards so that when the appointment comes, our challenge is we want to accommodate as many people as possible. Therefore, we need it to be efficient and we can turn the pages, without fumbling. And so that's why we ask for that information ahead of time. The challenge is we also don't want to rush you and we want to make it a special occasion. So we're trying to find the right balance there. But giving that information to us ahead of time helps us not, be fumbling around during your appointment time trying to find that name. And so usually we have these appointments we typically say 6 names is a good number up to which we can move smoothly. If you have more, it's not impossible for us to accommodate that. And as for the number of people in a particular group, depending on the venue, I think most venues we've agreed to partner with on the national tour, whether it's the NPS sites for the camps or somewhere like the Smithsonian or whatever. They can accommodate fairly large family groups or extended family groups. And so yeah, you shouldn't worry about how many people are in your group, and generally you shouldn't worry about unless you have like 20 names or something, then I'm going to get concerned. But hopefully within reason, we should be able to accommodate everybody to be able to honor whoever they would like.
And just a reminder, the stamping, there is no fee to stamp, that this is made free to the public as well. And Duncan, I think one of the other beautiful things about this national traveling tour is how much you've worked with the local community. And in a way, this planning these sites and these visits has given this opportunity for other Japanese American and community groups, private sites to really build those relationships. And so I think that's another beautiful byproduct of what you and your team with the Irei project have created with this traveling tour. There's another question about, is there an online archive representation of the book? Is it going to be copied digitally? Perhaps you could also talk about, is there going to be a revised version of the book once all of these amendments have been collected? And then what happens to the original book as well?
Okay. So let me first talk about what's online, then I'll talk about the different variants of the book. What's online is in some sense the most current, most revised and updated version of not the book, but of the project as a whole. And so what we're able to do online that's not able to do in a book, for example, if somebody got married in camp, and she has a maiden name and a married name that she used in camp, you can't show that in a book because you can only choose one name, right? So the online version has ways you can search for names aliases, maiden names, alternate names of different kinds. You have ways to see the most corrected form of somebody's name. And as I said, not corrected as well as alias alternate names. Of course, it has many more other features like which camps they were in and images of them and recordings of their names, stuff like that. So that's what's different, what's online versus the book itself. The original book, the reason we're going to take that 1.5 years is in part because our project is intending to gift this original copy edition of the Ireichō to the Japanese American National Museum as to be part of its, permanent or core collection. And the museum itself is undergoing a 1.5 year period of renovation and so forth. So we're hoping to kind of time this so that it comes back to LA just in good time, where we've been able to acknowledge all the names and it becomes a part itself, a kind of important artifact belonging, I think, rightfully at the Japanese American National Museum in LA. So that's the original edition with all the stamps. We do plan to create a revised version with all of the amendments and people that weren't in it originally, names corrected. We will create a second edition at the end of 2025. We'll start the process of creating that book. We're also, the two final things I'll say, we're also creating camp-specific ones that we will be donating to Manzanar, to Minidoka, with just the names of those who are in that particular confinement site. And so we're doing that for all 10 of the WRA camps and gifting it to the different museums, visitor centers, et cetera, that are doing the work of preserving and educating the public at those sites. And finally, this is something probably in 2026, but we haven't really made this public quite yet, but I'll tell you just we're actually going to try to create a regular book-size version of the Book of Names with the concept of printing them up primarily for camp survivors. That every year we're losing more, fewer and fewer camp survivors, and our project wanted to think of a way to honor all of those camp survivors, and we thought we'd create a book that we could gift to them, just a small version, and maybe have a way to make it more available to other people as non-camp descendants, other people as well, for some kind of at cost fee or something like that. But our project wants initially the focus to be on just whilst they're still with us, to provide every camp survivor who would like a copy with a free copy. So that's our general plans about how we're going to iterate the Book of Names.
Thank you so much. And I know we've one last quick question. How was this project all funded originally?
So at first, the creative director, my wife and I, we put in our personal funds to help with the project. Then use some of my research funds at the USC Shinso Ito Center for Japanese American Culture at my university. And then we were very fortunate to receive a major funding from the Mellon Foundation, New York-based foundation, involved in a big America's Monuments project. So their gift was extremely important to be able to conceive of this big, ambitious project. And then the Japanese American Confinement Sites, JACS grant from the federal government, helped us with developing some aspects of our website. And so that was also a very big and important generous grant. And now with this campaign, since last month or so, or this month, I guess we're still in, we're starting to be supported by the individual, members of the public, including, primarily the Japanese American community. So it's with that collective effort that we've come this far, and we will hopefully go the distance.
Thank you so much. And again, Duncan, thank you so much for your time for leading this incredible project. It has been probably the most deeply moving thing that so many of our families have encountered here at the museum. It's just been incredible to meet families as they come in, hear those stories, and of camp survivors as well as the descendants. We were just so grateful for creating this amazing experience and opportunity for the community. And then to all those, I think our call to action is, we would love to see the success of this Ireichō National Tour campaign. Thank you all for your generous support, your interest in this project. Please help us spread the word. I think we are just under about $30,000 left to raise, and we are very hopeful that we will, through the generous support of our community, will be able to reach those goals and successfully bring the Ireichō to all of these proposed sites. Thank you again. Thank you all for joining us, and keep posted on our newsletters and our website. We will be posting more about the national tour soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.